Hello, hello. Good afternoon and happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman, and we have a very important show for you today. Good afternoon and happy Friday, everybody. I'm going to ask you to do as you come in is like the broadcast and share the broadcast out with other people. This is an especially important show for any parents you know. If you are a parent, even if you're not, it's important for taxpayers, but it's really important for parents, okay? Even if you're a grandparent, this affects your grandchildren. So this is a really important show. I want to make sure as many people can see it live and ask questions as possible. Today, I have Kelly with me again. You may be familiar with her from previous shows. She's come on to talk about comprehensive sex ed, as well as the ethnic studies curriculum and things like that. Kelly is an independent researcher and an education advocate. She is host of the podcast A Time to Stand, where she shares her research and thoughts on educational concerns, parental rights, politics, all of that. And she mostly covers California. She digs up a lot of stuff in California. I'm in North Carolina, though, and I can tell you from my research and coverage that what she's digging up is just sort of the tip of the spear, if you will. I'm seeing it also in North Carolina. People are seeing it in Virginia. People are seeing it in Tennessee and Kansas and Kentucky and all over. And what I can tell you about today's topic, the whole child, whole school, whole community school model, is this is an initiative from the top down. This is not coming from an individual state. This is not something you, the people of your state, have asked for. This is coming from the highest people in the land. This is the CDC, the Department of Education, et cetera. So we can no longer say, well, I live in a red state. No, that doesn't apply. So welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for being here. Again, if you're just coming in, please share this broadcast out. Let people know we're here live. They can come and talk to us and ask their questions. So how are you today?
I'm doing well. So glad to be here. It's a beautiful day outside, but absolutely, even though we have this beautiful weather and scenery here, the politics and all of that is quite astounding. So continue to research, and it's really something that parents absolutely need to be aware of, because what's happening in education and what's on the way is a tremendous concern.
Yeah. And big changes. The other thing to remember too is that neither Kelly nor I are what you would describe as, right wingers or conservatives. We're not here advocating for any specific party or politicians. In fact, we probably would go the other way. Like we are concerned politicians on both of the two sides, if you're going to go by two sides, are involved in this, are supporting what we're about to talk to you about. This is not even about politics anymore. We're getting down to, and correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, Kelly, but we're getting down to the core philosophy of education. Whether you as a parent believe that you have fundamental parental rights to decide how your child is educated and what they, when and how they should be exposed to sensitive topics, when and where and how they should get their medical care, in particular, any mental health care they might need, and whether you need to just sort of hand that off to the state, whether you think the state is really the best provider of these things, or I should say the best decider about what should be provided, and whether you're willing to forego the freedom to make these kinds of decisions for your children for some alleged security that it's going to be provided for you at a lower cost or free. Do you believe that anything is really free when it comes from the government? So we're just dealing with a philosophical divide, right? It's kind of like, do you look at your child as mine? This is my child, not as property, but like part of my family. Or do you see yourself more as providing, more bodies for the state? It's really what it comes down to.
Right. Well, and I would say the most important thing here is that there's people from all political backgrounds that are growing in concern about this. I mean, whether people lean left or lean right or independent, somewhere in the middle, not sure what exactly where they stand. The important thing here is that parents care about their children. And when they see things happening, that's been starting to really wake people up. I know where I live, there have been multiple parents from all sides of the political spectrum that are asking these questions. What is happening in education? Why are the teachers' unions doing this, that, and the other? And what has really happened to a variety of subjects? Why is sex ed changed? Why is this occurring? Why is math changing? Why are my kids being encouraged in all these other areas? And there's just this huge change. And unfortunately, still, there's a lot of people that are unaware of these changes. But it's important that we're having these discussions because hopefully people can learn from them and then they can decide what to do with their family and what they want to research and get involved in. But absolutely, the more important effort that we can take as a community, whether you have kids in the school or not, is to be aware of the issues and what's occurring, because it will impact everything, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're here today to talk. Why don't you lay the groundwork for us? Tell us what the world, the whole community school thing is, and then we'll take a look at what you've brought to show us, and then I can also show what I found too. So
Sure, that'd be great. Well, it was just over a year ago that I was doing some research on social emotional learning, which is marketed as educating the whole child. So you can just anticipate I'm searching a variety of areas. I'm searching that particular marketing of that program. And then I came across this whole school, whole community, whole child model, which is referred to as WSCC or WISC. And I saw that there was this whole effort that had been initiated years and years ago to join health and education. And it was formally initiated in 2007, but really starting to take root in 2013. But essentially, the Center for Disease Control is now involved in education, and they're ramping up efforts for this WISC model. And in looking through all of their documents, I started to see that they have this 5-part plan. Then out of that, there's all of these. We could look at it if you want, but it is a plan that essentially has the healthcare system, dental, health office, counseling office, etc., all on the school site.
right.
And the community is encouraged to be involved in this. They have community partnerships with potentially nonprofit organizations, and those work in accordance with the school district. But the school itself, the public school, becomes the nucleus of the entire community through which the community then operates. And who would be really able to look at this and say, well, what's the problem here? You've got essentially a school district that's trying to provide for the underprivileged. And for some, they may look at this and say, well, that's just, that's caring. That's, kids and the community need these support services. But it's important to dig deeper. Who are the organizations involved? What is the plan? How do parental rights and involvement change?
Right.
So,
very strangely, it won't let me share the page. So maybe you can pull it up. I've got it up and it won't let me pull up the page, the CDC page. Very strange. I think it's probably my computer. I don't think it's anything sinister, but maybe you're able to do it.
Okay. Let's see here.
This is the one with the CDC link, so we can show people that picture.
Okay.
It's so weird.
And Okay.
I would encourage people possibly while you're watching to go ahead and search in your state, in your own state. Um, for you can look up the CDC, but I found my North Carolina version of this simply by going to our state's Department of Public Instruction, or you might have a Board of Education, whatever you call it, at the state level. I went to the search box and I typed in whole child. That's all I typed in was whole child. And I got this almost identical thing. And I'll show it to you when we're done talking about this. It's called, on theirs, it's the same diagram, the same little picture with the person in the middle of it. It's absolutely identical. And it says right on mine too, on my state, is the CDC's framework for addressing health in schools. And Kelly, when you first saw this, did you think to yourself, I'm sorry, what was the need for that? I mean, like, like we always had sort of a school nurse and a school counselor, and maybe you'd have a school psychologist if you had a high rate of kids that had issues or whatever. But I never, as a child, as a parent to date, it never dawned on me, gosh, I wish my kids could just go to the doctor without me present. I wish
Right.
my kids could just have random strangers at their school take them for their doctor visits, their dental visits, their eye. They already go for their eye test and hearing test, and that already wigs me out because they're like, everything's fine. They told me that my middle daughter had everything's fine with her hearing. Everything's fine with her hearing. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. Like for 2 years, and I'm like, something's not right. And there was something not right, but I had to go separately. So they were telling me everything was great because remember, there's dollars attached to special ed. So if
Massive.
they're the ones diagnosing, everything's fine. Everything's good. It's all good. Yeah, you're fine.
Right.
Anyway, sorry.
No, it's important. That is a really good question. What were your thoughts when I first saw this? Because the first thing I'm looking at is one of my first thoughts is, why is the CDC getting involved in education? Why would they be partnering with education and a community school? Or they also use the word interchangeably. It might be called a community school. It may also be called a healthy school. And the language is really important because the way that language is being used and the way even marketing of educational content is being used right now, it may not be picked up by those who are not regularly researching these topics. For example, here in California, I'm researching a lot of topics. And so in the midst of researching all of these, I know that the phrase, the transformation of education or the transformation of schools, that word transformation is a loaded term. So if somebody were to see that in another state, or maybe if they were to see it in this state, but not be aware of the way that is used by educational leaders in particular context, that may not jump off the screen to them because they're just reading it and they're not necessarily aware of what's going on. So even the fact that this says whole child, that is essentially the same ideology behind social emotional learning, educating the whole child. So this whole child schooling, that's important to be aware of. So is any form of transformation of education. Right. The other thing I witnessed, and I'm looking at, in addition to why is the CDC getting involved, is you can see the child in the center of the logo. Outside of the logo, you have all of these words, which let me see if I'm able to zoom in. You have healthy, safe, engaged, supported, challenged. That all sounds really good. And then outside of that, there's this ring that says coordinating policy, process, and practice, improving learning, and improving health. So that also sounds really good, but we have to ask, what is the ideology that they are basing their methods and plans on? Who are the collaborating organizations that they're involved with? What is the structure that they have for each of these community schools? And what is their intended intent once this reaches fruition, because there are community schools that exist, but according to this plan, not all of them have reached that full intended fruition. And then outside, you have this ring with these different statements there, which can be really shown. You have these different tenets: healthy, safe, engaged, supported, challenged. And this is all on the CDC's website. This is the coordination ring where they discuss that. But I do want to get down to this area of school components. You have health education, physical education and physical activity, nutrition, environment and services, health services, counseling, psychological and social services, social and emotional climate. There's SEL right there embedded into the program, physical environment. And you can actually drop down arrow on all of these and see a little descriptive of what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. Always towards the bottom, as a parent, I'm viewing this, noticing that family engagement is almost always at the bottom, almost always last. But it says here that families and school staff work together to support and improve students' learning, development, and health.
And you know what you mentioned, you said what they don't really tell you is sort of their final, intention. And I'm the person who comes in and says, what was the impetus for this? I think that parents assume because school boards exist, because we vote, because reasons, okay, we live in a republic and we supposedly have representation. I think a lot of people assume that maybe all the other parents got together and asked for this, or maybe there was a big need for this, or maybe they looked at the data and it said that, these schools were wildly unhealthy and there was all of this was happening in the majority of cases. The majority of parents were not doing their job, because if you look at that list you just went over, those are things parents concern themselves with or don't, right? So we worry about our kids' nutrition. We worry about our kids' health. We worry about it. When it's like the school is saying, we're going to do this, I have to raise my hand and say, I'm sorry, I got that covered. Your job is to teach them how to read and write and do math and all of those things that I am not able to do because a multitude of reasons, like I'm going to work, or I lack the training, or, whatever it is that you told me. You told me it was okay for me to go to work and pursue other things because you were going to take care of the academics of the schooling, so to speak, right? That was sort of the promise. And that you would do it between these hours and across this, and it would be a minimum basic standard of academic achievement so that my child would be prepared to be an adult functioning in the adult world with skills that are necessary to do that. And that it's my job to feed them and my job to keep them nourished and my job to keep them healthy. And that is really not for your concern, big brother. Okay. So when I look at this, I'm like, where did the desperate need for this come from? That's the first thing. And the second thing is I go, ka-ching, 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 massively expensive to replace parents. Look, parents, we know if we have to go hire a babysitter for a couple hours to just go out to dinner, it's going to cost a pretty penny. We have to put them in daycare, and it's just a baby, and just like keep them fed and diapered, and like you're not teaching them to read or write or do anything. You're not providing medical care. You're just like, they don't die and you take care of them. Okay. That's very expensive. And they're coming in and saying, we're going to do all your job. We're going to do the whole entire job. You just drop them off in the morning and pick them up at night, and you don't have to worry about anything else. And they market it like it's so great. Like, but you're forgetting, I signed up to do that job. I want to do those things because I have a point of view on how it should be done. And so I never look at these things as benign unless you explain to me. And I think it's a bare minimum requirement. If you're spending our tax dollars and you're going to implement a system-wide solution that's tied to the Center for Disease Control, which, by the way, has credibility somewhere below like the 7th level of hell right now in most people's minds. I mean, regardless of what party you're in, okay? And you're telling me you're going to suddenly do this, and you don't tell me why you're doing it. You don't tell me what the need was, but you make it like I'm supposed to be so excited. That bothers me a lot. And I hope that other parents hearing us today will think, you know what? I hadn't really thought of it that way, but now that you mention it, yeah, that is a little creepy, because I understand, right, Kelly, that there are probably parents going, okay, What's wrong with that? Or you hear, tell me if you've heard this one. Well, not every kid has parents. Well, not every kid is loved. Well, not every kid. Okay. But they're not talking about individual remediation or targeted supports, are they?
No, and they're not being transparent in their marketing about why they say they need this, what their intentions are. They're not being transparent on this page. If they were being transparent, they would be showing us all the organizations, but they say that they are collaborating. It even says here, right in this paragraph, every child in every school deserves to be healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. That is the focus of the whole school, whole community, whole child WISC model. CDC and ASCD developed this model in collaboration with key leaders. Who are the key leaders? From the fields of health, public health, education, and school health. Well, I'd like to know who they are, because that matters. That really can illustrate the direction of where this is intended to go. It can also illustrate to us the foundational beliefs, the ideology, where this is all directed. And in my opinion, if the CDC wasn't attempting to do a bait and switch on the public, where they market something as this shiny exterior that's very wonderful and lovely appearing, but in essence, parents are getting stripped of their involvement, that should have, in my opinion, when it says key leaders, that should be a hyperlink. And then you should be able to link to every single key leader that they mention that they're collaborating with. And when it says these fields, why not hyperlink those and tell us who they are? But they're intending to be marketing a product. And that's what's happening in education as a whole, is they're marketing products. And in my opinion, some of it is it's like taking, for lack of a better illustration, this is a terrible illustration, but if you were to take a pile of dog poop and cover it in glitter, and all you see is the glitter, truly, the glitter gives off this look that something is that is not. And essentially, this particular, when I was looking at it, I thought, in my opinion, this is not transparent. This is a lot of putting on a marketing PR presence to get buy-in from the public without providing full information about what will occur. And so parents and the community have to do our own digging. So that's what I did. I went through this whole website. It's important where it says at the top CDC, then dash home, then it says for schools. This is right in this area, dash home, for schools, whole school, whole community, whole child. This is important for people to be exploring. However, I also think it is important for the public to be aware of also this ASCD organization and who's involved. So we've already seen a presence on this page and discussed social emotional learning. There's also a discussion right here where it talks about, you can see how the model informs HIV, STD, and pregnancy prevention by viewing an animated video. And I can show some of that video, I think, if we can. Let's see.
Let's see what happens. You might have to select to play sound.
Can you hear it?
Help communities improve health and learning for youth ages 13 to 18. CDC's Division of Adolescent and School Health, or DASH, supports many components of the whole school, whole community, whole child model, also called WISC, health education. The health and safety of adolescents is improved when they acquire the knowledge, attitudes, and skills for making healthy decisions, adopting healthy behaviors, and promoting the health of others. Health services. Youth are generally healthy, but they can be healthier.
All right.
Wait, so I was trying to see, you can, if you play it but mute your mic, then it won't be echoey.
Okay.
So I think that's what's picking up. It's picking up in your mic. Not the computer, just the mic on
and more supported when preventive health services are available in their schools. Services can include STD and HIV testing, counseling, health education, and referrals to other teen-friendly health services. Counseling, psychological, and social services. Youth feel safer and more supported when they have access to services that reinforce their mental, psychological, social, and emotional health. Social and emotional climate. Schools that foster safe and supportive environments develop students who feel more connected to their schools, are stronger academically, and engage in fewer risky behaviors. Family engagement. It's important for parents to participate in their students' school life by supporting health services and education programs. Family engagement protects students and leads to better academic and health outcomes. Community involvement. Youth are more engaged and motivated when they work on projects that benefit their local communities. These projects can help youth develop academic skills and healthy behaviors. Coordinating policy, process, and practice. Student health and academic performance improve when there are coordinated school policies, processes, and practices. Enhanced coordination between students, parents, schools, and communities helps move the WISC model into action. DASH supports the model by funding school-based HIV and STD prevention, developing research and program tools, monitoring health behaviors, policies, and practices, and creating partnerships and communication resources. The 6 highlighted components are one way DASH upholds its mission. The coordination ring is a key to everyone making the model actionable. These 4 components are also important. CDC and other national organizations assist schools in implementing them. The WISC model, when implemented across schools, families, and communities, can greatly improve health outcomes and academic performance for all youth. The complete WISC model and definitions for all components can be found on the WISC webpage.
I have things to say. Can I say some stuff?
Please do.
I got things to say. It's like I'm bubbling over of things to say. Okay. So, in addition to not explaining like why this was necessary, they keep saying, listen to the language. As Kelly pointed out, listen to the framing. This can do this. This can do that. They don't say this research report that we did across 10 years with this many youth showed a decisive improvement. Okay, no, there is, just so you know, parents, 0. Let me repeat that. 0 evidence to support the claims they are making about this can do this and this can do that, and everything being school-centered that will achieve the things they claim. That's first. The second thing is, did you notice the framing of it is essential for parents to participate? It is essential for parents to support what we're doing at the school. Translation, if you disagree and you don't want your kids to be part of, whether it's, comprehensive sex ed, where they're talking about what they deem as sexual health. If it's you don't want them doing SEL surveys on their mental health every other day because it's actually making them anxiety-ridden blobs of quivering goo, you might be an abuser and we're going to have to deal with you. With the social workers we now employ all over the building, who have a direct dial on the speed dial to the Department of Social Services, where they can come to your house and make sure that you're not abusing your child by our new definition. This is nicely described in the little, matrix little voice to make you think this is all very helpful. None of it holds water. And I hope you noticed the community involvement. They don't mean community involvement. They don't mean when your kid is misbehaving, your next door neighbor is going to go, hey, listen to your mom. They mean that they're going to be encouraging your children to go to Rainbow Club after school and make posters to march against the Roe v. Wade decision and do a walkout against gun rights. And that's what they mean. Improve their community is by their definition. It's not by whatever your child thinks or what you think needs to be done in the community. It's going to suddenly be what the teachers and the social workers and everybody else thinks would improve the community. How very self-serving. The entire thing is creepy as you know what.
Right. And it's important. There's another screen I'd like to share here. Let me grab it. Screen share. Okay. Let's see if I can do this.
I hate when they use that voice.
I know.
They use it because it works. Because people hear that and they go, this sounds very effective and good and must be verified, I'm sure. It's the CDC. Nope. It's just the nice voice we use when we're selling you bullshit.
So the ASCD, which can you see the screen now, hopefully? Yes. Okay, yes. Great. When you are researching the healthy school or community schools, this is what can come up on their screen. The ASCD here in the top left corner is the group that is credited with partnering along with the CDC. Here's their creating a healthy school book for $78.99 right on their website. And this is a chapter preview. And it's important to note what we see right here.
The World Health Organization. So trustworthy. Right. Mm-hmm. I definitely want them telling me how to keep my child healthy. God forbid I would do independent research.
Yeah.
You can have a very personal relationship with your doctor as long as you're seeking an abortion. Everything else that you want, no. The government needs to be deeply, deeply, deeply involved in all of your other medical decisions for your child. Oh, you just want to terminate your child? That's fine.
Well, and this is key to when people are looking for those non-listed organizations that were the experts informing on this advice. Who is the World Health Organization collaborating with in terms of exactly what those programs were discussing, which is sex education. And also in that whole area of research, as we've talked about before, you have organizations like SECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change, Sex Ed for Racial Justice. We have organizations like Planned Parenthood. You can go back and see there's a background on this. You have the United Nations, you have UNESCO, you have the World Health Organization, the CDC, and the organizations which are informing on student sex education are these. And this is right on their website here. You've got the World Health Organization's description incorporates many structural factors that are part of each component of a coordinated approach to school health, also known as CSH. So it's a program. And then they talk about health promoting school culture is one that enables, motivates, supports, and reinforces student and staff adoption of healthy behaviors. But the thing is what is a healthy behavior and what is being really promoted right now? There's a lot of concerns that parents need to be aware of, because when it comes to having a health clinic on campus, when it comes to discussing sex education, who are the organizations and what's their ideology? I mean, the World Health Organization promotes comprehensive sexuality education. and their own working definition of sexuality as it pertains to comprehensive sexuality education includes pleasure and eroticism. And you have organizations that they have in various ways. You can find how there's give and take there with organizations like Planned Parenthood and some of these others. It was recently one that I investigated, SIECUS, SIECUS, and they held a series of webinars, and the webinars were sponsored by a sex toy company, B-Vibe. And if parents knew the full scope of what was going on, if there was a really clear picture here, they would shut this down in seconds. They wouldn't be buying into this. And one of the things that I'd like to, for everyone listening, instead of watching what's coming in education and seeing how it sounds so good, start scrutinizing what's coming in, what's there, what's missing, what are you not being told. Just like Deb pointed out, there's so much that they did not say in that presentation, that commercial. And if I were to watch an infomercial on TV, I would pick up right away on the paid audience that's clapping vigorously and looking really cheerful. I'd pick up on the missing part of all of the presentation when they come in and they say, you have to buy this fill in the blank product. It's a vacuum, whatever it is. Start really looking into these things, because unfortunately, there's too many agendas that have invaded our educational system. And this one is huge because it combines multiple organizations and different agendas. And what they're not saying is those organizations. So in order to start really grasping the plans and ideas, it's a matter of finding all these different little organizations down this rabbit hole. But
right. That gives you a window into, their proclivities, so to speak, and where the money is going to go to and come from. And people might ask, but why? And how? I don't get it. Okay, let's look at it this way. There are people in this country, many of them are currently in power, who have really, really wanted to get single payer healthcare to be a thing in this country. And you can say, well, I think it would be good. It helps people. Or you could look at it as, just take, for example, the formula crisis we have now. When the government controls something that you need, even let's say they give it to you, they're the ones providing you with your healthcare. But when they have that much say in something you need, like healthcare, they can take it away. Right now, there are women wondering how they're going to feed their babies because the FDA won't let a factory operate. The factory's cleared. There was no need for recall. There's nothing wrong. No babies were sick. Nothing happened. But because a government agency from the federal government is keeping them shuttered, you've got like 50% out of stock of formula in many, many states in this country, and it's becoming a huge crisis. So now imagine that's the healthcare treatment you desperately need to stay alive. Okay. Or your child desperately needs to stay alive. So it can sound really wonderful until you realize that people who have police power to give you something also have the power to take it away. And so they can't get it through. They've tried and tried and tried. And the American people have said, we don't want it. Okay. And they can't just force it on us. It has to be approved by, Congress and so on. So where is one area where we as Americans are very, we're very concerned, and we're willing to listen to the so-called experts a lot. It's about our children. And with education, we have been sort of socialized and acculturated to turn that over to other people for over 100 years. So I'm sure some very smart central planner bureaucrat said, we can't get it from the adults, from the parents and the grandparents. We're not going to get this centrally, controlled healthcare system. But if we start real young, getting them accustomed to going to the government location for healthcare, it's going to be a hop, skip, and a jump for them to want to keep that when they're adults. Because now think you're a 12th grader and you go on to college. And even in colleges, they now have health centers. Okay. So you're getting out of college. Oh no, I'm not going to be able to just go to the thing. And this is for the healthy person who didn't need it. Now, the sick person might be like, you don't want that. Like, talk to somebody who goes to the VA, talk to somebody who has to use Medicaid or even Medicare without a Medicare supplement plan. But the vast majority won't necessarily need it because young people are pretty healthy on balance. So they're going to want it. They're going to vote for it. It's very, very transparent to me what the end game is, which is single payer healthcare, which you can control millions of people in a finger snap. You also control dollars. To Kelly's point, who are the organizations benefiting? Whenever you see a government centralized, we're going to take care of all of it for you. Your first question should be who benefits and what is their ideology? Because if you look at all of these organizations, it is absolutely 100% one-sided ideology without any variation whatsoever. And it's not just like a little bit this way, it's all the way over. All the way over. And you get kids in at 6 years of age, or they'd like to go to 3 with, preschool, right? Mandatory universal pre-K. You get kids in at 3 into this kind of a system where they have breakfast and lunch, all their medical care, possibly even their summer care, their after school activities. The teacher is their mom or their dad at this point. What's your role anymore, mom and dad? You're out working to pay the taxes to pay for it all. That's what you're doing.
Right. And that's their plan, cradle to career. I've seen that going on so often here being promoted, where they really want to extend the school day. They want to extend the grades. They really want control. And the way you see that is you dig and you do your research. And another illustration that I think is important is I've met people who say, I'm not too concerned about what's going on when my kids are at school. I'm not really, it's not really a big deal to me what happens there. I've literally been told this. And I think it's important to be thinking, how much time do parents put into looking up reviews for that gift they're going to buy for their child or that new bike? How much do they look into the reviews of various products that they might buy for their home? If there was a leak under their sink, and somebody else told them, hey, I think there's a leak under your sink and your pipes, would we ignore that, or would we investigate? And then would we take action, and would we do something? And how much value does your child's mind and development have in relation to those other areas that we do invest our time and energy and resources and research into? We would spend so much time if there was a leaky faucet alerted to us by a friend who came over that was underneath our sink. We would spend perhaps quite a significant amount of time trying to find our child that great gift for, something special coming up. And we'd look into reviews and we'd see the prices and all of those things. And we would invest time and energy and effort into looking into these various things in our lives. If you're going to buy a new dishwasher, fill in the blank, a new washing machine, you're going to look into these things, I would imagine. And how much more value would you invest in time and energy and looking into what will be impacting your child, what will be impacting the whole community? Because the design of these programs is not just to impact the education system, but to then go beyond the walls of school. And also, right now in health, we've got the whole trend of pushing health equity. Here in my state of California, I've already seen doctors that have provided information showing that they are going through trainings on how to implement critical race theory in the health system. And there's legislation being passed that is pushing doctors towards what they call GAHT, gender affirming hormone therapy. Those kinds of things are being really strongly emphasized, or at least the affirmative only model. They're being really strongly encouraged in the health systems. And when you have that occurring, all these different things, it's important to pay attention, to do the research and see where you can perhaps connect the dots. So I encourage everybody watching and listening, absolutely do your own research. Absolutely be aware. I have a lot of people that also tell me, I am so glad my children, my grandchildren are raised. I'm so glad we're out of the school system. But the design of this is whole system change, systemic change. They want to essentially change America starting from within the schoolhouses.
Right. And you know, you mentioned a lot of analogies like, the dishwasher and different things. I think of another one, which is the grocery store. Would you would you be excited if the government came along and said, it is too confusing that you have to make choices about which grocery store to go to? We are just going to have the grocery store, we're going to run it. We're going to pick the grocers that we want to supply the stuff to the grocery store, and we're going to attach it to the school. So, you can just buy your groceries at the government grocery store. And initially some people might say, "Oh, that's great," until you'd go in and find out that they're, first of all, that your taxpayers prepaid, your taxes prepaid for it. And then it had, less and less that you wanted, and you really couldn't branch out, etc. I have so many people tell me already, I would homeschool, but then I'm leaving money on the table. I would pull my kid out, but I've already paid for it. Well, what's it going to be like when your taxes go up to pay for the health care you will already have paid for? And it sucks as bad as the academic care your kids are getting. They can't read. They don't think very well. They do everything on tech. They can't spell. They can't write. And now their healthcare is of a similar quality. The doctors and the nurses that they're getting to service it, et cetera, provided by some for-profit company that is in league with the government, and they're scrimping and they're saving and they're whatever to just supply it through the school. And you say, well, I would go to my own private doctor, but they've already taken my money for the public doctor or the public nurse at school or the public dentist. How many more things do you want them to just take from you and then say, we're doing you a favor, before you say, don't do me any favors, cut it out, stop it, I don't want this?
Right. And that's here in California. So if you're in another state, let me share my state and what is going on here. If you're 12 in California, you can leave campus without parental notification or consent, and you can go to Planned Parenthood for services. Now, at this point within the law, to my understanding, it is not yet legal for those students at that age to obtain what they would say is gender affirming hormone therapy without their parents' consent and knowledge. But they can get an abortion, they can get birth control and those kinds of things. But Planned Parenthood is starting to get into the business of hormone therapy. And I will say that it was in 2019 that the California Teachers Association did put out in their, what was it? It was a state council, kind of like their notes, where they took and accepted it by, it was majority vote, that they were wanting to work towards 12-year-olds to be able to receive gender affirming hormone therapy or hormone blockers so that they don't have to go through, their language, not mine, the wrong puberty. And then the quote was, without the barrier of parental permission. So when you hear that kind of language from a powerful entity like the CTA, that's something to not hold lightly. And the other thing that already happens here in California is if you're 12 and up and you see your pediatrician or your regular doctor, it's usually there's a private conversation that happens without the parents, between the doctor and the child. And then also, if parents want any access, my understanding is that if they want access to their child's medical records and health information, they have to get consent from the child. And that's already going on here. So imagine that at the schoolhouse. It says right here on ASCD's chapter preview of their recommended book, School Maintenance of Confidential Student Medical Information. and they would keep the medical records of the child at the school. That's already in the CDC's WISC model, right on their virtual healthy school. They have, you can enter into the virtual healthy school. Deb and I have done this before, and you can see and interact with different rooms in that model of the virtual school, like a video game, and medical records will be able to be something you click on in the health room and it pops to the forefront of the screen. So that's the design. And we have to be aware of all these other things. They're not going to come right out and say, hey, parents, we really want, we believe it's better and in the child's best interest if we take over and we make decisions between us and the child, because we are the ones that have the child's best interest at heart. And really, if this proceeds as planned, then this, and this will occur. They're not telling us their full plans and full intentions. So unless you're somebody that's looking through all these specific subjects, you might see sex education and think, well, HIV prevention and STD and all of these things sound really, really good. But then unless you've been researching the new sex education and the agenda behind it and the individual groups, it may not be a red flag to you. That's important to take into account. Is there is a new sex education and it is being encouraged nationwide, and there are different groups and they do have absolutely a political ideology behind them. And this design is something to be very concerned of, because when this is implemented, and it's going to be already, actually, I'm already watching it take root here in California.
It's how it's taking root in North Carolina and in New
Yeah.
Jersey too, I'm aware. And if it's all right with you, I'd love to show people the North Carolina one so they can see the consistency across states. All right, let me show what I found. And there's a couple things I want to comment on, because just yesterday I did a show about social workers invading the schools. Now, this is our North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. As I mentioned, I just searched for whole child and I got straight to here. It was pretty easy. It took me 1 minute. You'll see the same exact thing with the same list, family engagements, number 10 out of 10. But I want to direct your attention, they talk about integrating all of this, and they even have posters to market it and all of this, right? But I want to direct your attention over here to school social work. When we think of social workers, right, we think of crisis. We think of something going on at the family level, at a case level with a child, where they need a social worker because we need the school and the family and everybody to come together to help this child or help the family, right? That's what most of us think of with social work. There are now just tons and tons of school social workers who are on scene all the time, and many of them are teaching SEL lessons, as I covered in my show yesterday. But this is talking about, what the social workers do. And they say they're trained mental health professionals with a degree in social work and are licensed in our state. They're licensed by the Department of Public Instruction. That's different from some other states. So they help students improve their academic achievement, social, emotional, and behavioral. Did you know social workers were doing this? Or did you think school counselors were doing this? Social workers, again, they have more power. They have more power. And I'm going to show you. Now they have different, professional standards and roles. Now I want to show you the roles. Okay. The role of a school social worker. This is the school social work services. Oh, it's not that. Sorry. This one. I think it's this. Okay. So you can see this is from their association. This is a national association, the School Social Worker Association of America. They have direct services and indirect services. When you go into this is prevention, intervention, and crisis response. And look at this. Parenting. Okay. Direct intervention to address the immediate concerns of at-risk students. Now, I think we've seen over the last 2 years that what the government defines as at-risk is a little different than what all of us Americans have defined as at risk. Remember, we just had a giant wake-up call that at risk is not an objective term, that this is subjective. And when the government's involved, it is all over the map and right up into your business. So, no, you may not breathe in public because at risk. No, you may not walk around without an experimental vaccine because at risk. So their definition of risk and at risk with regard to your child and your parenting is something you probably ought to know and be very familiar with before you hand your child over, because schools have, and it's been well established in case law for a very long time, in loco parentis as it is. As it is, you sign something when you enroll your children that they can provide emergency medical care. Now, haven't we learned also in the last 2 years the definition of emergency is a little fluid? I mean, gender's fluid now by the government's definition. Gender is fluid by the government's definition. So is emergency, so is at risk. And now you have these people all over the schools as part of this whole child system that they're putting in place to handle these issues. Now, I mean, again, if you have all kinds of trust for the government after the last 2 years, not much I can say to dissuade you. I don't. And I would recommend that you do what Kelly has suggested and dig a little deeper and find out, they have this practice model. You can go in and you can read all of this for yourself. This is the national stuff. This isn't just at my state. This will tell you what they're going to do, how they're interacting with your child. I'll be straight with you. They're effectively parenting your children. They're parenting your children. They're even coming in between your child and their teachers. So it's just something you really need to understand. And are you willing to outsource the lion's share of your parenting? Because all those things we talked about, health, mental well-being, physical activity, nutrition, all of it, that used to be your job.
Well, and there's another document I'd like to share. Let me get there. I found this from UCLA. Let me get there. Here we are. Let me get up to the top. Okay. This is Evolving Community Schools and Transforming, there's that word, Student and Learning Supports. This came out in 2021. And you can see there, it says psych.ucla.edu. And it's important to be aware that the higher ed, UCLA, Harvard, Stanford, various schools are having a great influence and impact on what's happening in TK through 12th grades. And particularly, just as an example, UCLA has the Center for the Transformation of Schools. UCLA also has a Paolo Freire Institute. Just to give an idea of where some of this ideology is being, I guess, deriving from is the best way to say it. This gets into how are community schools defined in public policy, etc. But they also offer a prototype of a school community collaborative operational infrastructure. And it says right here, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, community schools increasingly are seen as a valued approach to addressing barriers to learning and teaching and promoting healthy development. Then it says, the Brookings Institution's Task Force on Next Generation Community Schools has even recommended, there's that word transformation again, the transformation of U.S. schools into community schools, centering initial efforts on the 4% of school districts that educate approximately 40% of the country's children. And then there's a lot of detail going in. There's other links, hyperlinks in here. But what I really want to get down to, well, this is an important thing to be aware of. Some of the programs and the design for this, you've got health center, mindfulness program. This is often what you would find with social emotional learning, which is a whole other topic of research. You have physical education, positive behavioral supports, another phrase without full agenda behind it. You have restorative justice program, pregnancy prevention, health services deriving from that. These are all things that are quite loaded when we get there. It talks here about some of the community-based organizations. I've already witnessed that some of the community-based organizations, even in my own county, are completely political and they're activating students. Some of the organizations that are paired with the school district. And then let me get down a little bit further here. Okay, there's a lot on here. Some other services that they talk about. Okay, let me find it. I think it is. Here we are. I believe this is it. Okay. I believe this may be the document. Oh, here we go. Right here. Planned Parenthood. Why is that important? Because Planned Parenthood is showing that they're getting involved with not just the services that they right now provide, but also their ideology. Many people are not aware of, for example, that Planned Parenthood has embraced all of the aspects of intersectionality, white privilege. There's a Planned Parenthood group in Arizona that's having Angela Davis speak. And for those of you who are not familiar with Angela Davis, I encourage you to research her instead of getting into a long path of who she is. But she was one of the leaders of the Communist Party, just for reference. And because Planned Parenthood is getting into this industry of hormones and those kinds of things, and because the medical industry is being really strongly pushed towards affirmative-only models for those who are trans, and a lot of the content being promoted out nationwide by various groups is affirmative only, even down to young ages. We're talking about little children making transitions at a very young age. So this is part of the organizations that they say may be collaborating with community schools.
And it's the official position of our federal government.
Right.
Our Secretary of Health and Human Services is trans and lived 50 years as a man, had kids, and so didn't go through puberty blockers or anything like that, and is saying that this is the official policy of the United States. So if the CDC is involved, you can assume that is the official policy of the CDC to affirm and offer puberty blockers, which means you can safely assume it's the official policy of the whole child community school model as well. Right. And so in California now, we have a 12-year-old can go and make these decisions. They can't drive, they can't drink, they can't get a tattoo or a piercing, but they could permanently destroy. They could sterilize themselves and permanently destroy their ability to have any kind of satisfying sex. For all the discussion of pleasure, that's what that would do. And not to mention all of the other potential negative side effects like bone deterioration, other mental health problems, things we don't even know because this is off-label use. Remember, off-label use was bad if it was horse paste. Things that really wouldn't hurt you. It just might not help you. That was the crisis. We had to compare people to horses and mock them for even trying to make themselves better. But apparently off-label use of castration hormones and hormones that will destroy a young woman's bone development, that's okay to be done through school without parental knowledge or anything, because certainly 8 and 9-year-olds can make these decisions, these informed consent decisions, for sure. That's the official policy of the federal government, guys.
Yeah. And you'd be surprised exactly what organizations are involved. And a lot of this is coming from not just these big schools, but I know one of the big names in education has promoted community schools for a long time, and that's Linda Darling Hammond. She's really been in discussion of community schools for quite some time. And she's got involvement where she's spoken in Paris at UNESCO. And in various interviews and involved with people who are promoting a variety of ideologically driven educational content, like deeper learning and whatnot. So when they're pushing community schools, we also have to be aware of where is it coming from, who is doing it, what are the organizations and money backing it. And there's also a lot of data collection involved in this. And my concern as well, like you said, these social workers, we're already seeing stories where if parents are not completely affirming what the school now tells them is their child's identity and pronoun, then it's not uncommon for a parent to have CPS called on them.
Mm-hmm. Very common.
Right.
So I think, a couple of comments have come up about how off-label use for drugs is very common, and it absolutely is. And that's why back when people were saying, you're using this off-label, this, IV, whatever, and I'm not going to name it because they'll probably give me a strike. But yes, it's that has been done, but we're adults. Mm-hmm. And we were asking the government if we grown adults could make an informed choice and try something that is incredibly safe, been around 50 years, lots of data, et cetera. Not whether medication that's used to chemically castrate rapists should be used on small developing children where there's no long-term studies done on what's going to happen. And there's a fair amount of evidence piling up every day that the use of it thus far over the last 20 years has been devastating to developing bodies. And we know for a fact it sterilizes them. We know for a fact what it does to their secondary sex organs. So, shouldn't parents be involved in that decision? Because saying that a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old can make an informed decision about off-label use is utterly ridiculous. If that's true, then like I said, why not have them make informed decisions about smoking or doing drugs or drinking alcohol or any number of other things that they could put in their bodies that ironically would be less damaging depending on how much they consumed, So I feel like we're not questioning things that to me on their face seem crazy, in part because we're afraid. We're afraid to offend. We're afraid to hurt feelings. And, I'm going to say this here. I said it on Twitter and I'm going to say it here too. Our children, Gen Z, Gen Y, all the and millennials on down. Let's just take millennials on down. I'd even include Gen X. I think are the least homophobic generations in human history. Good job. Good job, America. Good job, parents. Good job, everybody. Gallup doesn't even bother polling anymore about gay marriage because the majority are like either don't care or support it. There's like, whatever. Okay. So good job on the LGB section. But what we have now is we have the T and the Q and the plus and the everybody else on the other, the alphabet brigade, supported by the federal government and state government and lots of money and Planned Parenthood and everything else, piggybacking on our goodwill, our love and compassion and kindness that we've cultivated correctly for people. And they're saying, oh, we're the same. We're just another one. We're like that too. Except I don't recall anybody L or G or B coming along and saying that my child needed to mutilate herself to feel good about herself. Or if she was a little different and didn't fall inside a stereotype, that meant she was literally in the wrong body. Like we are so in a different category. And I just want people to wake up and realize, like, you are not an intolerant person. You are not a hateful person. You are not a bigot. And nobody's suggesting that you go to one of these children who might feel this way and tell them they've been brainwashed. But parents need to be told. Parents need to understand. That's what's wrong. And what I have a problem with the government is they're saying to parents, you only love your child if you go along with what is essentially harming them. And now they're going to go ahead and take it out of your hands. So you can't decide.
And we've got this clearly biased situation where the school districts are obtaining data on kids in very personal discussions. I've had parents share with me surveys that teachers created themselves in Google, where the survey is asking under the guise of bullying about all of these personal racial questions or all of these personal sexual questions. I've had, since the COVID shutdown, parents share with me that their child was questioned about their holiday plans. What did you do over the holidays? Did you have any guests in your home? Did you travel outside of the area? Did you do all of these things? And those kinds of things are happening in Google. And when CDC is involved, I mean, this is the same CDC. I believe there was just recently a news story about how they tracked and traced people's cell phones. So we've got that same organization now wanting to track and trace through data collection students, and they do incorporate that in the discussion of the WISC model. They actually call it surveillance, which is really creepy.
Surveillance.
Right. And then not only that, but there's I would say through this whole program and this whole presentation, you also have extreme data collection, but lack of transparency on the school's part, lack of transparency on the CDC's part, in the sense of, here in California, we really tried to get transparency over curriculum just for sex education. And we really tried to have legislation passed that would require schools to openly share the sex ed curriculum, because the sex ed was new, and that failed right at the Senate Education Committee in January of 2020, and they didn't want that. Not only that, but when you look at the actual sex ed curriculum and some of these other things, especially involving health, they are not including all the risks. It's not like those commercials on TV now where there's this new pill and we're going to list every possible side effect, every possible negative consequence that's out there. They're not telling kids it is a sex positive, is the way that they say their teaching is based in, and they're not listing all the consequences. They might encourage a child to, if you're going to engage in this activity, this is your safe zone, and this is a little bit higher risk, but they're not really getting into the discussion of all the potential consequences.
No.
That should be
and they're lying to parents. Like, here's a classic example. In lefty circles, they're touting, I think the New York Times published this too. They're touting a new study that shows 97% of trans persistence from age 8 to 13. What I believe they said was that children who are socially transitioned continue and remain trans. I don't remember exactly how they framed it, but I remember seeing a lot of criticism of the study and saying it was presented in a misleading way. Here's my theory. If to the extent that it's true, because I haven't read the study, to the extent that there's truth to it, I will say that when you start socially transitioning children at a very young age, the cost to go back, the cost to desist socially is enormous. It's enormous. Now, there's a very high correlation, and this is why people are so worried. There's a very high correlation between social transition and medical transition, which is part of why I think they're so eager to socially transition like that. Okay, with 6, 7, 8-year-olds, because once they socially transition them, and then they can start encouraging them to really make this stick. You got to do, your puberty blockers, whatever. Well, now you're kind of stuck, aren't you? I mean, you've made a physical commitment. So what they do is they keep upping the ante for the child. So the cost of desisting is much higher. The social cost, the physical cost, everything becomes a harder thing to do, which is also a reason I call this grooming. It's a reason I call this child abuse. And it's cult-like behavior. Cults do this. Cults lure you in with a sort of dopamine rush of love bombing and all kinds of things. And then behind closed doors, they make the cost of leaving the cult so high that you begin to put up with greater and greater levels of self-sacrifice and or abuse from within the organization. And I think that's what they're doing. And to me, it's logical. You get 8, 9, 10 years old. I mean, kids in middle school, they don't even have to be that young. They could be 11 or 12. You're taking children at the most socially vulnerable time in their lives, going through puberty. when they feel awkward. And if they're pre-gay children, okay, and possibly have any internalized homophobia, or they're picking up on that from the people nudging them that they're in the wrong body, and that's going to make it all feel better and go away. I wouldn't be surprised if it is true, but it's not in a vacuum. So I think they're not taking into account the variables of peer pressure and the hierarchy of the adult advisor to their club or the adult teacher or whatever influencing them. I do think, as Ego Brain says, if left alone, most of the research shows, Jen Speck has published this, if left alone, they just naturally outgrow it. They just naturally outgrow it. Does that mean the parents are like, no, you're a freak? And then what? No, there are lots of ways to support your child through awkward periods of time without offering them an exit door into crazy town. Okay. Because that's what it is. They're very, very confused and nothing feels right and nothing makes sense. An adult comes along who purports to be an expert and says, this means X. They're looking for a way out. And guess what? It comes with swag and a t-shirt and a flag and a team and a club.
Well, and I think that's an excellent point, Deb, because you think about children, it's already hard enough for a child to really acknowledge their true feelings in a class, for example, where a teacher is promoting something that the child is uncomfortable about, and then to stand up and say something to that teacher that is the antithesis of what is being promoted, because you're going against your peers, you're going against your teacher. I think of young children that grow up in a situation where perhaps it's something as simple as giving up their favorite blanket or their favorite thing in their room that was a childhood, something they were tied to or close to, but this is their very identity. And not only that, we have schools and teachers that are actively teaching the intersectional wheels that teach children that if you are heterosexual, you are horrible in a sense. You have this privilege. And we have teachers that are rewarding and doing special programs and celebration and adulation for those who are choosing to identify as LGBTQ plus. And there's ceremonies that, for example, you walk under a rainbow at school. You state your identity when you come through the tunnel of that rainbow. You're given either a donut or a cupcake. People cheer for you. You're received and you're affirmed and you're celebrated and encouraged. But to undo that has to take incredible courage. And even those who have, there's been stories recently of those who have, and there's been, I believe it's detransition awareness kind of news stories in the Bay Area in California. They're being disregarded. They're not being celebrated. When they go back, they're no longer standing in line with the agenda. They're going backwards. And it's very telling that the agenda is existing when to undo the process has to take great courage. And not only that, but those promoting the agenda do not have that same level of celebration, affirmation, and encouragement. And I think exactly the example of a cult situation, there's that lack of acceptance. So it would take tremendous courage. And when you are not just going against removing yourself from something like your childhood blankie or a special stuffy that you've had, you're actually removing yourself from the only identity of yourself that you've known. That is a huge process. That is a huge, tremendous amount of courage. I mean, I've known people in life who have decided to change their name, their first name, or they've decided to change the way their name is pronounced. And it's been very rare, but that for people is a really big deal. I mean, and I think about, there's honestly so many examples I could use, but for me, just going and changing my cell phone is a really big change in my life, because now I have to get used to the new way the phone works and the size of it and all the apps and whatnot. But that for the little child to know, and that is ingrained in their memory bank.
Well, and kids too have a natural desire for things to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to be more linear thinkers until they're at least 11. And then even it's not like they hit 11 and they're suddenly, able to conceptualize, things they have no background knowledge for. And remember, we have kids now who have the COVID delay in terms of the amount of background knowledge they have to use for their conceptualizing. We have kids who are on the spectrum or ADHD. Jen Speck, the webinar I went to explained that these kids take even longer. They've done MRIs where these children take a longer period of time to mature. They're physically mature, at the same rate, but they're not as emotionally and intellectually mature in terms of, transitioning from that sort of linear model of thinking to being able to think in a more complex way. And they can be as much as 5 years behind. So when we look at the comorbidity of kids who are, ADHD or on the spectrum who are transitioning, and it's so high, it's so noticeable. And remember too, there's a difference between girls on the spectrum and boys on the spectrum. They manifest really differently. Girls do a better job of what's called masking. We don't really know why. The theory is partly social, it's partly cultural, that girls from a very young age are just raised, handled, talked to differently, which, it could be biological. We don't really know, but we do know is they tend to be diagnosed much later because they do a better job of masking. What is masking? Masking is sort of looking like you fit in, mimicking or mirroring the behaviors and facial expressions, whatever, of the peer group around you. Girls tend to be more group oriented to begin with. They tend to do more face-to-face interaction, where boys do more parallel play. And so they might pick up on like, oh, if I hold my face this way and I do this. So they learn how to mask better to fit in and feel their equilibrium is, and again, it's a spectrum. So I'm not talking about like autism where the child is nonverbal. I'm talking more Asperger's. And so it's not like it's recognized by the parents as readily and they just seem shy or quiet or, whatever. But they go into a situation like this. The first thing that happens is they're presented with something absolutely destabilizing to their identity. Boys, girls, it's all a spectrum. There's many, many different genders, and the doctor might have been wrong. That's, as Kelly just pointed out, all you've known for 6 years is I'm a girl. That's it. That's what you've known. And for somebody to suddenly say, maybe they got it wrong. Okay, you're like, what? Okay, so that's destabilizing. Keep going with that for a number of years. And now you hit puberty or you're about to, or things are developing and you're like, what's going on? Nothing makes sense. I don't feel right in my own body. And somebody helpfully comes along and tells you the reason is, here you go. Now, the child who is more discombobulated by the inability to have things line up, black and white thinking, linear thinking, is going to more readily grab onto that to feel okay again. The cognitive dissonance is going to be more physically painful. You notice, these kids have sensory issues. It's more physically disruptive and emotionally disruptive to them to have that hanging out there. So they get an easy answer, boom. And it can be many different things. It could be the body dysmorphia that goes along with transitioning. It could be an eating disorder. This is what I need to do to control things again. I'll do this. But it's a search for control. It's a search to feel okay. It's a search to feel like things make sense again when things don't really make sense. And if parents are cut out of this conversation, they can't even come in and offer their opinion. Very often when I've talked to parents who say they found out early that this was happening, they got in there, they talked to their child and said, this isn't true and this and that, and they explained it from their perspective. And the child actually got angry at the school, like felt scared of school, angry at school. You got to get like really early in the beginning of the conversation and suddenly felt terrified for their friends. Like, oh my God, they lied to me, so, but that's why they don't want you involved in the conversation. It's not that your child doesn't trust you. It's that you've dropped them off at school and said, trust the teacher. Teachers are experts. They know things. So they're just going down that path. And then the teachers just don't tell your parents because that could be dangerous. And why wouldn't they believe that? So it's absolutely predatory. It's absolutely predatory. And this community school model is going to ramp it up, I believe, to a frightening degree.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the last thing you said was key, is that kids are often taught to be obedient from the point they're little. You know,
Yep.
they're 2 years old, they're going through the stages of 2 and 3, and they start saying no a lot, and you start really molding and shaping the importance of different settings and how to behave, and they learn this in preschool, etc. And in school they're taught to obey their teachers, they're taught to obey their coaches. And it is so important for kids to understand and to be taught that there are times and places when you need to scrutinize the situation, and you need to be aware that there are healthy boundaries that you can have and things that you do not tolerate and you are not obedient to, that there is a time for a child to stand. There is obviously times that adults take a stand, and there's moments where you just don't obey every single thing you're told. There's healthy reasons why kids are taught to say no and to not tolerate something. For example, you train kids to be aware of their personal and physical boundaries. If somebody touches you inappropriately in a place that's not acceptable, kids need to be given the tools to say no and to stand up for themselves and how to handle that situation. But the same can be said for teachers and school teachers, because what is really shifting over in these WISC models is also these sexuality discussions that will be brought into this through the social workers, the psychology counseling offices, and through these health clinics and the way that they're being designed. They are being designed and encouraged through the model to be having these discussions with kids and to understand their sexuality and to understand their sexual interactions and not make assumptions, and really to explore these issues. But in the realm of asking questions and data collection and being able to take notes on these various things, some of these kids will, in these health situations and these counseling situations, be introduced to the topic and the idea for the first time. And that's also important to be aware of. One of the things, oh wait, you got
I just wanted to, thank you so much for the super chat. Is there a different or better identity for kids to hold other than a gendered one, or is gendered so base that it will occupy a lot of their ID? I think it's an excellent question. I can only give you my opinion. And my opinion is that identity is an ongoing process that most of us as humans define our identity over the years, and it can evolve and change. But the most basic identity for a child is probably the things that they personally value. Like, I'm a member of my family, you know, I'm a son or a daughter or a brother or a sister. You know, and then you might say, you know, you're not a brother if you're not a boy, you're not a sister if you're not a girl. But it's not that you have an identity as a boy or an identity as a girl. See, that's what they've done, is they've put this idea in our head that there's such a thing as gender identity, and there isn't. You perhaps have other parts of your identity that might be gendered, like I said, brother or sister, but I don't walk around thinking of myself as having a female gender identity. I don't. I'm just me. I am female, but how I express that is, you know, my own business. And we were at that point. That's why I said we've gotten to a point where we've blown out the walls of all the stereotypes a long time ago, right? Women can wear suits and cut their hair short, and men can, I suppose, if they want to wear heels and makeup. Men wear makeup all the time. Men have worn makeup since, you know, like the 15th century. That's not something new. But we've sort of blurred the lines of what's expected there for a very long time. So, you know, they've just taken gender expression and they've blurred it with sexuality, and they blurred it with this feeling in your body called gender identity, which is just not true. So I guess what I would teach my own children, what I have taught my own children, is, you know, you are those things that are most obvious, like you're a member of our family. You're my child and you belong to yourself, and you're the sibling to your siblings, if you want to use sibling in ungendered language. But other than that, you're the sum total of the things you like, and, you know, the things you like to do, and your tastes and your interests and your whatever. I mean, we've twisted what identity means to include all these externalized and immutable things, like what color skin you have, or what your ethnicity is, and that these things don't really tell us a lot about you, right? See, you're not going to learn anything about me really that wouldn't be a stereotype if I said to you, for example, well, I'm half Jewish and half Mutt. Okay, like what does that tell you? It tells you nothing unless you start filling in with all kinds of stereotypes. If I told you, I'm in this such and such generation, same thing. You're going to have to start filling in with stereotypes, with heuristics of what you've experienced in the past. It doesn't tell you who Deb Philman is. And we have to teach our children the same thing, is who you are is located inside and it's evolving. You're going to make that, not your teacher, not your school. And guess what? Not me. The parents don't even do it. We can influence our children's journey. We can expose them to things. We can support them in their development. But most people agree that if a parent says, you are this, that's a bit controlling, right? I mean, we see stories about that all the time. You're going to be a Catholic and that's it, or whatever. You're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be this, or your identity is as a blah, blah, blah. And we instantly know that's kind of domineering when a mom or dad does it. Why is it okay when the teacher does it? You're a white, cis, hetero, blah, 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 blah. And we go, oh, yes, definitely agree with that. We don't call the teacher overbearing. We should. Anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of like the identity question is one that gets me fired up, because I think a lot of us have bought into the notion that we even should be discussing it with our children. Why? Why should we be discussing it with young children? I was never nobody talked to me about my identity when I was in grade school or even high school. Literally no one. I made it all the way through 12th grade without anyone talking to me about my friggin' identity. Why are we doing it? Give me a good reason to do it.
Well, and I think identity has become a new focus, and it's been framed in a certain way. So, for example, now that we have intersectionality, identity is being essentially driven and steered towards the favorable identities that are, in a sense, the victims of society. And those are the wanted positions, not the oppressive ones. And I've even heard reports from inside the schools that those who are technically on the hierarchy of the ladder, where they would be considered oppressive, that they're trying to fit into other categories just so they can lower themselves on the ladder and be more accepted. So if
transracialism is coming, you guys. Transracialism is coming.
So what they're doing, I mean, you might have a guy who is, mixed race, but he's Caucasian as well. And he might be straight and married and have children, but in order to step down that ladder and be more accepted among his peers, he might start wearing pearls or things like this. True stories that I've heard. And reports from students. For example, I know students that their teachers will go on rants about politics, the preferred political position in the schoolhouse. And so the student keeps it very quiet what their identity or whatever, what they identify with as their political belief system. But essentially it's being woven and constructed, and people tend to focus very specifically on things. So I remember years ago hearing this example. Let's say somebody's trying to stop having coffee, but the coffee is their focus. And they're just saying, I want to stop having coffee, and I want to stop having coffee. But the coffee is still the primary focus. Technically, they might replace it with something healthier and start saying, I want this. But if the focal point of our society is being crafted in such a way to encourage identity in one region, it's going to impact kids. I mean, people find their identity in so many things. A lot of time over the years, you'd hear people identify with their job. I may fill in the blank, and I do this. And now gender identity and all of these things are being woven in. And by the way, genuinely, I keep hearing people, and I might be wrong on this. I just yet have not experienced it while living here in California. I hear people changing their pronouns. I hear people saying I'm they, them pronouns. I'm fill in the blank, they, they, zir, those kinds of things. And they want others to utilize their preferred pronouns either throughout or on the given day. Pronouns may change each day. This is what I'm not hearing, that I just at least haven't heard yet. Maybe it's occurring and I haven't, but I do not, for example, those with they, them pronouns, I don't hear them introduce themselves as we are. I'm just sorry. I just went off.
I'm with you. I'm a grammar nerd too. So every time I hear that, I'm like, I can't, if I were having to teach English in the schools right now, I'd be losing my mind. If somebody wrote me a paper with a they, them character in it, I'd be like, this makes no sense. I can't follow this and I'm not grading it. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and yeah, there's so much to be controlled and steered. So for example, it was very integral in the movements with Martin Luther King Jr. that character was really a driving factor of what the focus was for people. What is the content of their character, and how does that span out in how they live and how they do things? I mean, there's a lot you can tell from people based on their character, obviously their value system, how they live, but there's so much more, like you said, to people beyond this exterior, beyond all these other things. And personally, it appears that people are being drafted into this well-coordinated, designed agenda that tells them my identity is everything. And oftentimes it is based on a status of things are stacked against me. I'm a victim. I'm this, I'm that, and the other. I've fill in the blank. I've had difficulties in life and I need equity. And oftentimes today's ideological identities that are being really steered, in my opinion, are almost always tied with an agenda. And who's that agenda coming from, and who is crafting this, and what's the outcome? What's the intended outcome? Obviously, character is something that yields benefit to the whole community. And anyways, it's so sad to see kids, because I've been to school board meetings and I've watched student after student after student get to the podium and talk about identity and their struggles and what's going on. And you can just see and hear the product, the fruit, so to speak, of so much that's being really pushed upon them. And everything becomes about, this intersectional wheel of power and privilege.
Yep, absolutely. So the bottom line on the community school is, what do you want to say about this?
Yeah, I would say, and do we have time for me to share one more screen?
Oh, absolutely. We could talk for hours, but I know that you have somewhere to go. So I didn't want to keep going over.
I know. I did want to just show this one last thing. Okay. Here we go.
I'm trying to be mindful of your deadline.
Thank you. All right. So ASCD, these are some of their blogs. I encourage everybody who's listened to this today to be familiar with both what's on the CDC's website, what is on ASCD's website. This is www.1.ascd.org, but it's probably, you can get there through ascd.org. But you can see right here that this is one of the main organizations joining with the CDC, and it says right here, equity. And then it talks about the pandemic's toll on learning. Right here, we've got supporting LGBTQ students in the Don't Say Gay era, developing an equity mindset. These are all blog posts that they've shared. How leaders can create clarity on race and curriculum, navigating DEI in schools, 5 crucial considerations. So like I said from the start, it's really important to be aware of what organizations are really joining together, what's their ideology, and what other organizations can we find that are part and parcel of this big agenda. And obviously, if it goes back to the WHO, the World Health Organization, UNESCO, or UN, and various groups, there's a lot to be concerned about.
Yep. Did you want to share this screen?
Oh, sorry. I must have not hit screen share. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's like I'm listening and I'm like, okay, I want to see it.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
Can you see it now?
I can.
Okay, good. Okay. So
There it
right
is.
here, we've got Equity, ASCD.org, and then how leaders can create clarity on race and curriculum. These are all, like I said, blog posts, navigating DEI in schools. And back here was the ones I mentioned before, supporting LGBTQ students in the Don't Say Gay era, equity mindset. There is a lot of content on their website, both in blog articles and more. I think at the top, Miguel, there he is, Secretary Cardona's 6 Pathways Forward in Education. Many people are starting to become more aware that his agenda for education is also one to be concerned with. So anyways, that's that. They have books and literature for sale, resources, videos and podcasts. Just dive in, everyone, and make sure that you're being well informed about what's happening, because this will influence, like I said, beyond the walls of the school. It will influence the whole community, because their aim is controlling, in my opinion, controlling more of the whole child, the whole school, and the whole community.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So parents, the moral of the story is you do have to do some homework. As Kelly said, there's you're handing your baby over to total strangers all day long. And the argument that, well, they already took the money from me really isn't, I mean, like I said, you would be really skeptical of the car they gave you to drive your children around if they gave it to you for free, or the car seat that they just dropped off for you to use. Like, you'd be wondering, is this the best one? Like, is it really safe? They gave it to me for free. Or you've already paid for this, came with your house, part of your property tax. Here's your car seat. Here's your car. Are you going to just throw it in the car and start driving? Or are you going to maybe look under the hood and make sure the brakes are working and all that? Okay. This is where they're going to spend 8 hours a day, 9 months of the year, times 13 years, possibly. Just a suggestion. You might want to look into it. And I know that a lot of people come to the channel or go to other people's channels, Kelly's podcast or Substack or mine. And we get a lot of, like, why don't you do this? And how come you don't do that? And it's too long and I didn't watch it. And I need shorter this and I need more clips. And I'm like, I'm trying. I'm one person, right? I don't mean to be a jerk, but like, I'm one person. Kelly's one person. We do this because we feel like we have to. But if you want to help, and you have got free time, you've got skills, how to do video editing and whatever, and you want to help us produce this kind of content, like, please, by all means, send me a note. I can do it when I can do it, but we all have other things that we do as well. We just are doing this because we feel like we have to, and we are more than happy to have help. So I'll just leave it at that. I am trying to produce more shorts, but it's very time consuming. Right, Kelly?
Correct.
Just doing one podcast can take like half a day. So I don't think people quite realize the amount of work that goes into even one of these shows just to get it going. But just my little thing I had to toss in there because I get that a lot, like a lot. Anyway. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Kelly, as usual. And please, like, share, subscribe, and make sure parents are aware of what's going on. I think that's it, right? Yeah. All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody.